Welcome, everybody, back to infectious diseases. And today we are going to be talking about modes of transmission. So remember that last lesson we looked at types of pathogens, and there are 6 types of pathogens that you should be aware of. Well, infectious diseases is all about what are the pathogens and how are they transmitted, right? It's it's good to know that what they are, but how do we get the disease? Well, you need to know that different types of pathogens have different preferred way of being transmitted, and that there are different types depending on how it is being passed on to from one infected individual to another. And there are contact, vehicle, vector, transmission, right? So your goal should be to be able to apply your knowledge in a novel situation. And also know the differences between a direct and indirect contact. So what do we mean when we talk about modes of transmission? So think about modes of transport. So when you are out and about, um, to get from place A to place B, what are your modes of transport? Would you walk, bike, by car, or by train? Right. So this is what we're talking about when we're looking at modes of transmission. But rather than transporting you, we are transporting the pathogen, which is going to cause you disease. So the first type we're going to talk about is contact transmission, and it is specifically passed between people. So between people who have been infected, so infectious individuals pass from one to another. Depending on how this contact has been done, it can be classified as direct contact. So people who have been infected, they spread their saliva. So, when you cough or you sneeze, and the aerosols go into the air, and someone walks by and they inhale that droplet. Right, so it's the fluid has been transferred directly to another person, and so hence we call it direct contact. The second one is called indirect contact, and so the infected individuals, right? Say for example they cough into their hand, they don't sanitize their hand, right? So they are infected aerosols on the hand, and you go and grab a door handle, right? So you transfer these aerosols onto the door handle. And so someone else comes in, touch the door handle, open the door, doesn't wash their hand and eat something, and voila, they get the disease. Right? So they get the pathogen, and pathogen causes the disease. I have to be very specific here. Right. So for contact transmission, think about everything that we have experienced in the last 2 years in terms of COVID, right? Why do we have masks? Because we know that COVID spreads through aerosols, right? So if you stop disease people from spreading aerosols through mask, right, you would stop the direct contact. Why is it that we want to wash our hands and sanitize very often before you eat? Well, you don't know what you have just touched, right? So if you can sanitize your hands, then it means that you have stopped the indirect contact, right? And that is why you would have cleaners sanitizing your schools most commonly used door handles everywhere. Right? It's part of the COVID protocol. So contact transmission is passed between diseased individuals. Think COVID. Two, vehicle transmission. Vehicle, right? Think about you getting in the car and moving from place A to place B. What is that? Well, it's when the pathogens are carried in a non-living medium, right? So non-living things like water, in food, very commonly. Think about how you get food poisoning, right? So food poisoning happens when food is spoiled. Often it is caused by E. coli and the overgrowth of E. coli. You ingest it, and you can guess the rest, right? Or another example is when you drink water that is contaminated with a protozoan, one of the 3 Ps, remember from the last lesson, right? So vehicle, so think about these pathogens, right? They have been transported in a non-living medium like a car, right? It's a vehicle, right? And the vehicle transports itself to something where you can ingest later on. Right. The third one is called vector transmission. So it's what happens when pathogens have been carried in a living medium that's being passed on to another person. Right. So we call this living medium often like a host, and often we have mosquitoes as a classic example. So Plasmodium lives in mosquitoes. So Plasmodium, remember, is the specific species that causes malaria, but it needs the mosquitoes, right, as its host. So we call the mosquito, right, the host for Plasmodium. And this particular type of transmission is called a vector transmission. So think of all the different types of diseases where you need to get bitten to get the disease. So malaria, rabies, just to name a few, or dengue fever. Yep. And so there you have it. You've got your 3 modes of transmission. Right. Remember to stop an epidemic. An epidemic is defined as a disease that's been localized in a specific area. Right. To stop to stop an outbreak, you need to stop it from passing from one person to another. Right. And there are 3 modes: contact, passed directly between people. So I should not confuse you to use the word direct. Contact transmission is passed between infectious disease and infected individuals. And if it's direct, right, through spreading fluids and transferred through aerosols or fluids, direct contact. If it's something that they touch, and it's indirect, we've got vehicle transmission and vector transmission. I will see you all next time.